Welcome back to Movies Explained. Today's film is a crime drama from 1990 titled, Goodfellas. East New York, Brooklyn, 1955. Henry looks out his bedroom window and admires the gangsters in his neighborhood. He believes that being a gangster is better than being the president of the United States. He gets an after-school job at a cab stand run by 𝒍𝒊𝒌𝒆, who works for his brother Paulie, the local mob boss. At first, Henry's parents are happy that he found a job, but they soon become concerned about his involvement with the mob. Henry's father, who was sent to work at age 11, believes American kids are spoiled and lazy. Henry's mother likes the fact that the 𝒍𝒊𝒌𝒆 are from the same part of Sicily as her. However, they change their minds when they realize Henry is spending more time at the cab stand than in school. Henry's father receives a letter from the school informing him that Henry hasn't been attending. He becomes angry and beats Henry, calling him a liar and a bum. Despite the beatings, Henry remains committed to the cab stand and his mob connections. Later, Henry informs 𝒍𝒊𝒌𝒆 that he can't make any more deliveries because his father will kill him if he skips school again. 𝒍𝒊𝒌𝒆 and other gangsters then abduct the mailman responsible for delivering letters from the school to Henry's house. They threaten him and force him to agree that he will no longer deliver school letters to Henry's home. From that point on, Henry stops receiving letters from the school and becomes even more entrenched in the world of organized crime. Paulie presides over the backyard barbecue as mobsters mingle and chat. Henry's voiceover narration explains that many people depend on Paulie for protection from other criminals, and that the organization is like a police department for wise guys, something the FBI can't comprehend. In a later scene at night, Henry helps 𝒍𝒊𝒌𝒆 commit arson at a used car lot. As he breaks car windows and sets the cars on fire, Henry reflects on how his life has changed since his association with the mob. He no longer has to wait in line at the bakery, his neighbors respect his family, and he has more money than he can spend at the age of 13. The neighborhood kids even carry his mother's groceries out of respect. Henry's mother opens their front door and is shocked by his gangster-like appearance. The scene then shifts to a man running towards the pizzeria where Henry is standing, screaming that he's been shot. 𝒍𝒊𝒌𝒆 tells Henry not to let the man in, so Henry brings a chair outside for the injured man to sit on and begins wrapping his hand in aprons. The man is eventually taken away by an ambulance, but 𝒍𝒊𝒌𝒆 chastises Henry for wasting so many aprons on him. The setting then moves to the cab stand at night, where Henry works amidst people playing cards. He describes this time as a glorious time for wise guys, before the Appalachian meeting and Crazy Joey's war. It is during this time that Henry first meets Jimmy Burke, a young but already legendary figure in the criminal world. He is a big spender, tipping generously and impressing everyone around him. Jimmy asks Henry to make him a drink, and after he brings it, Paulie introduces them to each other. Henry's voiceover narration explains that Jimmy is a feared and dangerous figure, involved in the criminal world since he was a child. His main passion is stealing, and he is one of the city's biggest hijackers. The scene shifts to show Jimmy hijacking a truck, with the driver offering no resistance. Jimmy even gives the driver some money in return, earning him the nickname Jimmy the Gent. The police, unable to stop him, eventually become his partners. The scene transitions to the cab stand parking lot, where Jimmy and Tommy are loading hijacked cigarette cartons from a truck. The two help a school crossing guard carry the cartons to her car, and as she drives off, Jimmy introduces Tommy to Henry. A police car pulls up to where they're standing. Jimmy gives the cops some cartons of cigarettes before they drive off. Later, Henry is selling cartons of cigarettes to factory workers when two undercover detectives approach him. Tommy runs away as Henry is arrested. In court, Henry is defended by a mob lawyer and walks free. Jimmy greets him warmly with a $100 bill and commends him for not ratting on his friends. Paulie and the crew cheer and embrace Henry for handling his first arrest like a man. 1955, a now older Henry narrates that there was $30 billion worth of cargo moving through Idlewild Airport, and Henry's crew stole as much of it as possible. They had friends and relatives who worked at the airport and would tip them off about incoming and outgoing shipments. If any truckers or airlines caused trouble, Paulie would use his connections to intimidate them. Whenever the crew needed money, they would rob the airport. Inside Sonny's Bamboo Lounge, Henry and other mobsters gather and discuss business. Frenchie McMahon, Air France cargo worker, enters the lounge and is greeted by Henry. They have a conversation at the bar about a big load coming in soon. When Sonny Bamboo, the lounge's owner, brings up Tommy's past due tab in front of the guys, Tommy becomes enraged, breaking a bottle on his head. Later, Sonny meets with Paulie, seeking support against Tommy and the others. He asks Paulie to become a partner in the lounge to help deal with the trouble they're causing. With Paulie as a partner, Sonny has to pay him every week, regardless of how the business is doing. Paulie runs up bills on the lounge's credit, knowing that nobody will pay for it. As soon as the deliveries are made, they sell the merchandise at a discount, quickly bankrupting Sonny and ultimately burning the place down. As the place burns, Tommy asks Henry for help on a double date with a girl named Diana and her friend, and Henry reluctantly agrees. At the restaurant, Tommy is enamored with Diana while Karen seems bored. Henry is eager to leave and excuses himself to attend a meeting with Tuddy. Henry accidentally stands Karen up on their next date, leading to a confrontation outside the cab stand. Despite the initial tension, they agree to see each other again. Henry meets Karen's mother and takes Karen to the Copacabana, impressing her with his connections. He tells her he works in construction and is a union delegate. In the next scene, Henry and Tommy steal $420,000 from the Air France cargo area without using a gun. They give Paulie his share and celebrate their success. Later, Henry and Karen spend time at a beach club, where Henry is introduced to Karen's neighbor, Bruce. At a nightclub, Henry and Karen receive champagne sent by Billy Daniels, and Karen reflects on how exciting it was to be with Henry, who was well-connected at the age of 21. At Marty Krugman's wig and beauty salon, Marty complains about Jimmy, who wants more money than agreed upon. Henry tries to reason with Marty, but Jimmy ends up attacking Marty with a telephone cord. The phone rings and Karen tells Henry that her neighbor Bruce attacked her, prompting him to rush out of the salon. Enraged, Henry confronts Bruce and brutally beats him with a gun. Later, Henry and Karen get married in a small Jewish ceremony. Their reception is attended by Paulie and the entire crime family, where Karen is introduced to a multitude of wise guys and their wives. Paulie hands Karen an envelope filled with $100 bills, and she soon realizes that all the wise guys are lined up to give her similar envelopes as Henry stuffs them into a bag under the table. At Karen's mother's house, her mother questions Karen about Henry's whereabouts and the kind of person he is. Karen defends Henry, but her mother insists that normal people don't live the way he does. At a cosmetic party at Mickey's house, Karen listens to the other women talking about their lives and how they deal with their husbands and children. Karen realizes that their lifestyle is quite different from hers and wonders if she could live that way. Back at Karen's mother's house, Karen expresses concern to Henry about the possibility of him going to prison. Henry angrily dismisses her concerns, claiming that only careless people go to jail. He reassures Karen that their criminal activities are just business. Karen starts to accept this lifestyle, seeing it as a means for blue-collar guys to make extra money by cutting corners. Later, Henry and Tommy hijack a truck and they force the driver into a car and drive off in the truck. Karen's voiceover describes how close their criminal group was, always sticking together from hospital visits to vacations, showing the normalcy of their lives despite their criminal activities and never letting outsiders in. Karen discusses how there was always some harassment from the police wanting to search the house, but they usually just wanted a handout to keep quiet. Later, at Henry's bar, a wise guy from the Gambino family named Billy Batts is celebrating his release from prison. When Billy insults Tommy, Tommy comes back after everyone has left and beats him to death with Jimmy. They stuff him in the trunk and drive to Tommy's house to get a shovel to bury him. On the way, they hear banging from the trunk, they open it and discover that he's still alive. Tommy becomes enraged and stabs him until he dies. Henry's voiceover narrates that since Billy was a made man, his murder was a delicate matter. They needed a good reason and approval before killing a made man. The scene shifts to Sunday at Paulie's house, where Henry and Karen, along with the kids, attend a gathering with relatives and friends. Paulie pulls Henry aside to ask him about a missing Gambino wise guy named Batts, whose disappearance has been causing problems. Henry assures Paulie that he has looked into it, but nobody knows what happened to Batts. Back at the nightclub, Henry and Janice are drinking with the crew when Jimmy pulls Henry aside and tells him that they have a problem with the body they buried. The property has been sold and they need to dig up the body before it is discovered. Henry, Jimmy and Tommy struggle with shovels, digging up the decomposing body. The stench is unbearable, but only Henry seems disturbed by it. While cleaning out his trunk, Karen asks about the smell and Henry says he hit a skunk. Later, Janice shows her new apartment to her friends. Henry explains in a voiceover that he set Janice up in the apartment around the corner so he can stay there on occasion. He explains how Janice has been messing up at her job and he also had to straighten out her boss. The crew and other wise guys play cards as Spider, a young apprentice, serves them drinks. Tommy drunkenly demands that Spider dance while he shoots at his feet, accidentally shooting him on his foot. He's carried to a doctor down the street as the card game continues. Karen throws the car keys out the window in an attempt to prevent Henry from leaving. She accuses him of lying and cheating on her. Henry angrily throws a lamp at her but misses, before leaving the house. During their next game, Spider returns with his foot now bandaged. Tommy continues to taunt Spider, who finally tells him to go F himself. Jimmy praises Spider's courage and mocks Tommy for taking the insult from a punk. In a sudden act of violence, Tommy shoots Spider 3 times in the chest, killing him. Angered, Jimmy tells Tommy he's digging the hole this time. Karen shows up at Janice's apartment with her children, screaming at her to open the door and stay away from her husband. She spends 2 hours ringing the doorbell, but Janice refuses to open the door or come out of hiding. Henry is woken up by Karen, who is holding a gun to his face. Karen is hysterical, threatening to shoot Henry and his mistress. Despite her anger, Karen admits she still can't bring herself to leave or hurt Henry. As Henry denies any wrongdoing, he manages to quickly move his head and grab the gun. He slaps Karen and rushes out of the house. Later, in Janice's apartment, Polly and Jimmy tell Henry that Karen is very upset and he needs to straighten things out. Henry is sent away for a few days with Jimmy to relax and clear his head. During their trip, they beat up a man who owes them money and threaten to feed him to the lions and ultimately force him to pay up. Upon returning, Henry and Jimmy find themselves arrested, as the man they beat up had a sister working for the FBI who turned them in. They are found guilty and sentenced to 10 years in prison. Before going to jail, Henry shares a drink with his friends and reluctantly leaves the bar to turn himself in. In prison, Henry describes the elaborate dinners they have, with everyone contributing to the meals. Even Polly was in there with them, doing a year for contempt. Henry and his mob associates are living with all the amenities they need, separate from the other prisoners who live in poor conditions. Henry is shown bringing in contraband items. In addition, he smuggles in drugs like marijuana, heroin and pills to sell to other inmates. During a visitation day, Karen enters wearing an oversized coat to smuggle in more contraband. She sees Janice's name on the visitors list and confronts Henry, causing a scene. Upset and feeling abandoned by their friends, Karen talks about the difficulties she faces outside, with Tommy being in prison and their friends being unhelpful. Henry tries to reassure Karen, telling her they need to help each other and forget about everyone else. He explains that he has a plan to sell drugs inside the prison and they'll be fine in a month if she keeps bringing in the contraband. Karen is afraid of the consequences, especially if Polly finds out. Henry insists they need to help themselves and be careful. Still emotional, Karen tells Henry she doesn't want to hear about Janice anymore, and Henry promises he won't mention her again. After 4 years, Henry is released from prison. Karen picks him up and they return to her small cramped apartment. Henry tells Karen to pack their things and start looking for a new place. He mentions that he is owed money from a partnership and is confident that it's only the beginning. They head to Polly's house for lunch and Polly warns Henry not to get involved with drugs anymore and to be careful around Jimmy and Tommy, who he describes as wild and dangerous. Henry begins selling drugs again without Polly's knowledge, using Robin's apartment as a base. He quickly sees success and brings Jimmy and Tommy in on the business. Later, Karen shows off their new house to friends Marty and Fran. Marty convinces Henry to participate in a once-in-a-lifetime robbery involving Lufthansa that could make them very rich. In a mob hangout, all the wise guys who will be part of the Lufthansa robbery gather to watch a basketball game. Each person has a specific role to play in the heist, Tommy and 𝒍𝒊𝒌𝒆 grabbing the outside guard, Frenchie and Joe Buddha rounding up the workers, and Fat Louie keeping the workers tied up and away from alarms. In the midst of these preparations, Henry has everyone working, even their old babysitter, Judy Wicks, who transports drugs for them. At Robin's house, Henry prepares the merchandise with Robin. While Henry is taking a shower, he hears a radio news broadcast about the Lufthansa heist, with speculation about how much was stolen. The scene transitions to a private Christmas party at Robert's Lounge, a celebration of the Lufthansa heist. As Henry and Karen arrive, they are greeted by Jimmy. During the party, Fat Louie shows off a new pink Cadillac convertible he bought for his wife Dolores, as a wedding present. Jimmy becomes angry with Fat Louie, as he had warned everyone not to buy anything conspicuous for a while since the police were watching them. Fat Louie tries to calm Jimmy down, saying the car was bought by his mother and is in her name. He forcefully takes Mrs. 𝒍𝒊𝒌𝒆's coat and tells 𝒍𝒊𝒃𝒆 to return it. At the bar, Jimmy and Henry notice other characters flaunting new clothes and jewelry. Marty approaches Jimmy and Henry to demand his share of the heist money, but Jimmy walks away without acknowledging him. Henry tries to calm Marty down, promising to talk to Jimmy on his behalf. In a back room, Jimmy gives Henry a small part of his share of the heist money as a taste for now. Later, Henry brings home a large Christmas tree for his family. He gives everyone Christmas presents and Karen a thick pack of bills, suggesting she buy herself something nice. Meanwhile, Stax is killed by Tommy for not disposing of the truck from the Lufthansa heist, leaving evidence for the police to find. At Robert's lounge, the group is celebrating. Henry, concerned about the police investigation, wants to talk to Jimmy, who brushes off his worries. Tommy joins them and Jimmy reveals that Paulie has opened up the books and Tommy will be a made man. Henry is stunned to hear the news and congratulates Tommy. As they head out, Marty tries to talk to Jimmy. Henry stops Marty and tells him to stop worrying, he'll get his money. Later, outside Robert's lounge, Marty confronts Jimmy and Tommy again. Jimmy agrees to talk to Marty and as they get in the car, Tommy stabs Marty in the head. Later, Henry and Karen are woken up by Fran, who is worried because Marty hasn't returned home. Henry tries to calm her down and promises to look for Marty. Later, Jimmy and Henry discuss what to tell Fran about her missing husband, as Jimmy distracts two FBI agents following him. A series of gruesome discoveries occur, with the bodies of various people connected to the robbery found dead in different locations. Despite this, Jimmy is happy as today is the day Tommy is supposed to be a made man. However, instead of being made, Tommy is killed in revenge for the murder of Billy Batts. Jimmy is devastated by this news, as he and Henry had hoped to have one of their own as a member of the Mafia. On Sunday, January 11, 1979, Henry has a busy day planned. He starts by putting a bag of guns into his car trunk and notices a police helicopter. He has several errands to run, including dropping off guns at Jimmy's, picking up his brother Michael from the hospital, and getting some new Pittsburgh items for Judy to deliver to customers in Atlanta. Henry drops off the guns at Jimmy's, but Jimmy is upset that the silencers don't fit the guns and refuses to pay for them. Later, Henry spots the police helicopter again while driving. After picking up Michael from the hospital, they return home where Henry starts preparing a big dinner. He plans to finish the dinner early, so he and Karen can take care of the guns and get the package ready for Louise to take to Atlanta. At 11:30 a.m., Henry and Karen leave their house to run their errands. They notice the helicopter following them and decide to unload the guns at Karen's mother's house. After hiding the guns in garbage cans, they go shopping to distract the helicopter. They eventually return to Karen's mother's house to retrieve the guns. At 3:30 p.m., they meet with the Pittsburgh dealer, who laughs off Henry's paranoia and exchanges the guns for heroin. Henry then plans to return home, prepare the heroin package for Louise, and finish cooking dinner. Henry calls home to check on dinner and make sure Louise follows his instructions regarding the package. Despite his repeated warnings, Louise calls from inside the house to confirm her flight details, potentially revealing information to anyone who might be listening. Henry is frustrated by her carelessness, which could jeopardize their operation. He returns back home to finish cooking while waiting for Louise's flight. He tells his brother to watch the stove, and rushes to Sandy's house to prepare the package. Later, Louise arrives, and they discuss taping the drugs to her leg. She insists on going home to get her lucky hat. As he backs up the car, an FBI agent points a gun at Henry's head, ordering him not to move. FBI agents raid the house as Karen flushes heroin down the toilet and conceals a small gun in her underwear. Henry and Louise are all brought into the FBI office. While being questioned, he sees that they also arrested Sandy. Henry ends up in jail, but Karen gets her mother to put her house up for bail, and he is released. He fears for his life, thinking that either Paulie or Jimmy might have him killed. His plan is to stay alive long enough to sell off the drugs the cops didn't find and then disappear for a while. However, he finds out that Karen flushed the drugs down the toilet during the raid, and they have a heated argument about it. They eventually fall asleep holding each other, with Henry holding a gun in his hand for protection. Henry goes to see Paulie to apologize for his involvement in the drug business and admits he lied to Paulie's face. Paulie gives him $3,000 and says he must turn his back on him. Later, Karen refuses to live their lives in hiding, but Henry insists they must leave or they'll be killed. Meanwhile, Jimmy asks Karen about Henry's condition and says he needs to talk to him. Karen is overwhelmed with her own worries, but Jimmy offers her some money and directs her to a nearby store. However, Karen becomes suspicious and decides not to enter the store, fearing for her life. Henry and Karen's relationship is strained, and Henry decides to meet Jimmy at a diner. Jimmy asks Henry to go to Florida to take care of someone who ratted them out. Henry realizes that if he goes to Florida, he would likely not come back alive. He ultimately decides to cooperate with the FBI and testify. Henry and Karen are at the FBI office discussing their new life under witness protection. They express concerns about their new location, with Henry not wanting to go anywhere cold and Karen worried about the children's schooling. Agent McDonald assures them the FBI will handle these matters. Meanwhile, in Gefkin's bar, Polly is arrested by FBI agents. The scene transitions to a courtroom, where Henry reflects on how easy it was for him and his family to disappear since everything was registered under different names. He laments leaving the life of crime, reminiscing about the luxuries and power they had. Jimmy and Polly receive a prison sentence of 20 to life. The scene then moves to a quiet street in a Midwestern town where Henry now lives. He complains about the lack of action and the quality of the food. As he retrieves the milk and newspaper from his doorstep, he explains how he's now an average nobody and will have to live the rest of his life like a schnook. Thanks for watching, like and subscribe for more videos.